just let's start with more bins, which is where we kind of left off with you, Rob. Yep. This was a typical solution identified by many people to us. One individual said, the overflowing bins show that some are doing their best to put litter in bins. More bins are needed. Some types of bins are inappropriate, as such items like pizza boxes are too large. Larger, cheaper and more uncomplicated bins are needed. You've already identified some of your issues around there, and you indeed had bins in some of your pictures there. So are more bins the solution?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, and it's great to see so many people were kind of interested in a topic that is much, it takes up much of my life at the moment. But I mean, I think, as I've said already, really, I'm not quite sure when there will ever be enough bins. Do you know what I mean? There's at least, the 4,000 bins across Leeds. I was in Park Square in the city centre recently, quite a small green space. I think there's 16 bins in that small space, and I'm just not convinced that more bins will be the thing, because I think there will be always plenty of people who think that's still too far for me to walk to put something in the bin. I mean, I think, as I suggested, I think placement of bins is clearly something to look at. Again, we've done quite a bit of work on that with Leeds by Example, looking at where to put the recycling bins. It's not particularly rocket science, but it's about thinking about how to, where the sources of the waste are. I think other kind of points that have come up kind of already in the discussion, I think the design of bins matters. I think there's probably something that we could kind of play about with in parks a little bit. I think someone mentioned about, bins that look more attractive, maybe look like, shaped like an animal, or a fun for children to put some waste in. I think that's certainly worth kind of exploring. I think the kind of messaging on the bins matters as well. So, again, I think that's why the campaign over the summer is really interesting. And can we have some messaging on the bins that, first of all, tells people what to put in them, but maybe also there's messaging about why it matters to put you to recycle, or whatever it might kind of be. And then kind of final point is that I think there are some technology kind of answers here as well. We've got these smart belly bins in the city centre that can take more waste, but also let people know who are there to empty the bins when they're kind of full. So yeah, in summary, I think clearly bins have got an important role, but I'm not convinced that more of them would solve the problem.
Richard, go on, interject. Thank you, Rob.
Sorry, I just unmute myself. Yeah, in many cases, I do agree with Rob. We get this quite a lot. I keep getting tired of people saying, there's not enough bins, and my answer is always, well, how many bins do you want? Do you want a bin every 10 yards? Because actually the research we've done often shows that if people have to walk more than 10 and 20 yards, it can sometimes be a bit too far. Very much a first world problem, I know, but that's the reality that we face. The other thing with more bins is, of course, it might cost 300 quid for the bin and a little bit of cost to install it. That's not the capital cost, is not the issue. It's the revenue cost of then having to service that bin on a collection round. And I talked about local authorities spending every year £700 million on street cleansing alone. I mean, that's the equivalent of over 30,000 nurses' salaries, to put it in context. So all we do is just continue to increase that cost. I do absolutely agree with Rob that actually, arguably, less bins, better located in hotspot areas and consistently designed, because what happens over time, you get a plethora of different designs of bins. So if you have a consistent format, people get used to it. One other important thing is that sometimes bins can actually attract littering. So when they're full, people start to litter all the way around the bin, rather than thinking, I'll take it home. So I'm not necessarily an advocate for more bins. I'm definitely an advocate for bins, but well designed. Big belly bins, yeah, absolutely have a place. They're quite expensive, and I think you wouldn't necessarily have them everywhere. But I guess in summary, I kind of echo what Rob is saying, in that more bins, I don't believe, is the answer.
Thanks. So fewer, better placed bins. Isobel, any thoughts, or Martin?
I have a comment really in support of what both Richard and Rob have said. I suspect design of bins could be better, maybe capacity increases without making them too unwieldy to empty. I completely take on board. I mean, we get this a lot. We get a lot of people just seeing what we're doing and saying, the problem in this park is there aren't enough bins. And I'm sure Richard and Rob will get this all the time. I'm sure Isobel does. I don't think this is the answer. I think it may be short term, better placed, better designed bins. I would really love some sort of element of recycling within Roundhay Park and probably other parks as well. That would be great. But I think what we've got to do is reduce the volume. I mean, bearing in mind what we experience as volunteers, huge quantities of litter. I mean, people have been going into the park having picnics. You can see the outline when they've taken the blanket away, and it's outlined with everything, huge quantities of stuff. And they've walked maybe 10 or 20 or 30 yards to the car. They brought the stuff in the car, unloaded it, had their picnic, picked the blankets up and got in the car and went away. So I think more bins wouldn't necessarily help in that situation. But I do think we've really, really got to push. And this is a sort of, I was going to say long term, I'd like to think medium term objective. Recycling is important, but I'm by a month or two, I'm the oldest person on this panel, I think, probably more like 10 or 20 years. I remember the deposit bottles, and kids would collect the bottles and take them back to the shop and get a deposit back. It was a good way of supplementing your pocket money. And I think we should be doing the same. I mean, there are schemes, I think in Norway, they have one where you just take the plastic bottles, feed it into a machine, and it gives you a ticket, which you can spend in the shop. I think the incidence of plastic bottles dumped in the park would absolutely dramatically drop, or not completely disappear, but it would go right down if that system was in place. So I think lots of good bins is important now, but I think we need to be looking much more intelligently in the future. How we attack other things like the less pleasant things like the nappies, I think this is education and education, involving children and teenagers and leading by example. People often say, I mean, we did a freedom of information request to find out how many people have been prosecuted in the Roundhay area for litter picking in the last few years, and basically nobody. But I have to encourage our volunteers not to tackle people, because sadly at the moment, if you tackle somebody that you see has dropped litter, you might and probably will get a level of abuse or worse. Things are not quite as safe as they may have been a few years ago. So I think there's that side of it. And for park staff, the beleaguered park staff, to take on that responsibility is a lot. And a lot of these people that work in the park, they're now spending a disproportionately large amount of their time emptying bins, not doing some of the other things they should be doing, perhaps, or what would prefer to be doing.
Ending on that park staff comment, Isobel, 4,000 bins in Leeds. Do we need more? What's your perspective?
I suppose very much like others have commented, is, you know, installing more bins. How many bins exactly is it going to take? I mean, Roundhay Park alone has 104 bins, you know, an awful lot of bins for us to be emptying on a daily basis. You know, we are actually installing some more bins over the coming weeks. I think you're right. It's about strategically placing those in particular sort of hotspot areas. So, you know, that is work that is being done. And as Richard sort of points out, you know, the cost and the installation of the bin, whilst it's quite expensive, you know, you're looking at sort of £400, £500 in some instances. It's not so much that initial outlay, it's that ongoing cost, and I'm redirecting my staff's efforts from, you know, actually the upkeep of the park and the upkeep of that green space, and that's been redirected into litter collection. Well, why is that okay when that is somebody else's litter? It is their responsibility. You know, that I feel much like other people on the panel, this has got to come back to some form of education and people taking personal responsibility for their own waste. You wouldn't do it on your own doorstep, would you? So why go out to a place that's actually offered you some great salvation over the last sort of few months in particular? Why go do that, you know, at at any point. Take it home with you.
Thank you.